Welcome to What Is. I'm Jaden, your host, and today we will be going through 13 questions, all beginning with what is and diving into the human experience. Today's guest is someone I'm really excited to talk to. It is Erin Gunter.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is our first time meeting, so I'm excited to learn more about you. And the connection is my graphic designer, Harry, is connected to you. And we were talking about who should we have as guests. And he was like, I have someone perfect that we should have on. So thank you for coming today.
It's my pleasure.
Yep. So before we begin, give us a little synopsis of who you are, just so that the listeners kind of have an idea of where you're at currently in your life.
Okay. Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 children, but I'm also an amputee, a below-the-knee amputee. And like you said, we have a friend in common, Harry. He is my son's soccer coach, which is how I know Harry. But when I was 10 years old, I decided to have my foot amputated after having a series of corrective surgeries since I was born. And I think that's why I stood out to Harry, because I'm one of the only one-legged people he knows. So
that's awesome.
It's a little bit about me.
So you made the decision.
I did at 10 years old.
No way.
Yeah. Well, in accordance with my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was born, my right leg was completely backwards. My right foot only had 3 toes. My tibia and fibula were fused together, not developed normally. And because it was backwards and I was a newborn, they were able to turn my leg forward with casts until it was forward. But my right foot, because of the 3 toes, my ankle was immobile, but because of the deformity, I had to have 2 different sizes of shoes every time I bought a pair of shoes, because my left foot was bigger than my right foot.
Oh my goodness.
I had to have surgeries on my ankle to get it to work. And by the time I started growing, my right leg couldn't keep up with the growth of my left leg. So then I had to have lifts put on my right shoe.
Yeah.
So at 6 years old, one of my first major corrective surgeries was leg lengthening, because we were trying to save my leg. Yeah. I was in Salt Lake City at the time. At the time, we found a surgeon that had never been performed on someone as young as I was. And so I was featured in the medical journals and that sort of thing. But in the process of having my limb lengthened, I got staph infection. So I was in the hospital for 2 months with my leg, my incision open and exposed. I came in every day, cleaned the infection out. So I preface the rest of my story with that because it was part of my decision making down the line. But after that got all cleared up, my legs for the first time were both the same length. It was amazing. I still had physical therapy and other surgeries trying to get my ankle and everything to work. But by the time I was 10, my right leg still couldn't keep up with my left leg. Wow. So I was back in my doctor's office again, and Dr. Coleman asked me if I wanted to continue having my leg lengthened every couple of years until I was done growing, or to have it cut off. So that's where I was faced with my big decision.
Wow. That's crazy.
Big decision for 10, right?
That's all I was about to say is what a monumental thing to try to understand. Like when I think about me when I was 10 years old, I don't even know.
Right.
The biggest decision I made was which cereal am I going to have in the morning, right?
And that's an important decision.
Yeah, exactly. But when you tell people about this experience, or they obviously notice and might ask, what is kind of the questions or the first questions people usually want to ask you?
Well, the thing that I always find surprising is people would first, before asking me questions, would say, I could never do it. And I always stop them there and say, don't limit yourself. Yeah. You don't know what you're capable of until you're put into that situation. But I've been stopped by strangers. People have stopped and asked me. They've been so curious. And the thing that I have found is kids are the most honest.
Yeah.
I mean, kids will stare out of curiosity, but they're also the ones that are the most interested, and they have no problem asking questions. And I've always been very open about it and happy to talk about it. I mean, for example, when I returned from school after having my leg lengthened, my principal asked me to do a whole assembly for the whole school to tell them what happened.
Whoa.
And then when I had my foot cut off, the same thing. After I got back, they're like, will you please stand in front of the whole school in an assembly and explain what you've been through? So I guess I've been conditioned to share.
Okay.
So I've always been very open about it. And usually, I introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Erin. I have a fake leg. How are you?
Yeah.
So I've just been that transparent about it.
Which I think is honestly the best route to go. Because if you are trying to hide it and it is something that you're like, oh, do they notice? Then it just leaves a lot of like room for you to get hurt.
It does. It's interesting though, in my formidable years as a teenager, I mean, I turn heads. People stare. I mean, my kids later in life, as they'd walk with me, like they started noticing that people their heads were on a swivel when I'd walk by, and I'm so used to it.
You don't
it doesn't. I mean, I notice it, but I'm like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But my kids are like, they're all staring, and I'm like, that's right. So as a teenager, I didn't like it. I didn't want to be different than everybody else. I didn't want that to set me apart. So in the hot weather, I was wearing pants. Because if I was wearing shorts, people would notice. If I was wearing pants, people couldn't notice.
Yeah.
And so I grew out of that though. I finally just realized it is what it is. It's part of who I am. It's built me. So I've embraced it.
Was there a moment that kind of like that switch happened?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was just kind of one of those things where, I mean, it's pretty amazing the opportunities it's given me, because I have had more conversations with more people than I think would otherwise have ever happened. Right. And I love that if I can help someone understand something that's foreign to them or alien to them, it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm sure I don't know if you have, but have you had opportunities where maybe a younger, let's say, a child has had an amputee or had their leg amputated? Have you had anyone come up to you and been like, oh my gosh, you're like me kind of situation?
Okay, it was flipped. So
interesting.
I actually served a mission for my church when I was 21, and I was serving in Riverside, California. And I found out that a sister missionary had just come to the mission that was an amputee almost identical to mine.
No way.
And so we happened to be in the same area, and I ran up to her the first chance I got. And I'm like, hey, let me see your leg. Yeah. And she was very offended. She was hurt. She didn't want to show it to me. She didn't want to talk about it.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, oh my goodness. I was humbled in that moment, because I realized not everybody is as transparent, is as accepting.
Yeah.
Or maybe, and she had only been an amputee for a short time, so it was probably still new and she was still processing it, right? But yeah, I learned right then that I needed to handle others with more care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And we've kind of went a little off of the normal script, but
yes.
I am fascinated, obviously, as everyone else is, right? Yeah. Because, and I think that's just human nature. Like, I don't know what that's like, right? Or that experience.
Right.
And so the intrigue is there of like, what is that like? Like, as far as putting on shoes, when you're picking shoes, is there certain shoes that you like better than other shoes because of it, right? And like, it is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because my footwear has been limited in the past. Mm-hmm. If you think about when you're putting your shoes on, you wiggle and you can move your ankle.
Yep.
My ankle is fixed on my prosthesis. So I can't wear really high boots unless they have a zipper. And even then, sometimes it doesn't give me enough clearance to get it on. But high heels have never been really an option, but I'm 5'8", so I'm okay with that. I did have a prosthetist when I was younger he was determined if I wanted to be able to wear high heels to make it happen for me. So he had an articulated ankle that I could change with an Allen wrench. And it was fun to try for once, but then I finally was like, it's not worth it. I don't want to do it. So flip-flops aren't really good for me, but I can wear slingbacks. So yeah, that's interesting that you ask, because I can't wear everything.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. And there's other things I'm sure I can't even think of that you know what I mean? That
you're just now coming up with, oh, wow.
Yes.
This is what we're talking about.
Yes. So we'll start with the first question, if that's all right. So what is a book that has profoundly changed your perspective?
Okay. So I was thinking about that, and I read the book Unbroken, and it's a World War II book, and it's an autobiography about Zapparini, and he was a prisoner of war, and it's called Unbroken because he was put through, I think, what would break most people, the conditions and the abuse he experienced while being a prisoner of war, and that one just really resonated with me, just because he wouldn't let his captors break his spirit.
Yeah.
And I think, being born with a deformity like I did and having to go through the things I did at the ages I did taught me from the beginning that I didn't have a lot of control over things, but I had control over how hard I tried, what my work ethic was, my attitude, that sort of thing. So I've always been real big about having a good attitude and being grateful for what was going right for me. And so that book really resonated with me. But if I'm being honest, and I know this isn't a religious podcast, but I mean, I'd be lying I'd be amiss if I didn't tell you that the New Testament and the Book of Mormon have really helped me just studying the life of Christ and understanding that, this life is temporary and this isn't going to be my forever, and knowing that I'll have 2 feet again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those are the 3 books that have had the most profound effect on me.
And I love that book so much. And I think it is like, as I've gotten older and more mature, I feel like I've understood what I can control and what I can't.
Yes.
Because a lot of my life, when we first got married, and I feel like I can control everything, right? I was like, I'm in control. I'm making things happen. And then curveballs started coming at me. I'm like, what is this? And then it would then start controlling me, right? My circumstances. And I feel like that is something that really has benefited me immensely mentally, is understanding the things I can control, right? And consciously deciding I can't control that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to let it be what it is, but then I am going to control how I react to it or the next steps.
And being at peace with it too.
Yeah.
Just understanding, if I get upset about this, it's not going to change the outcome anyway.
Yep.
But, I'd also add, getting married and on that, you had the responsibility now, you felt that mantle. And so you want to be
correct
everything you've ever thought about, you've wanted to fulfill those roles. So I can see where that pressure was on you, but to already have reached those kind of conclusions, I'm impressed, because it feels like it's taken me a lifetime to reach where I'm at too.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if you know much about my backstory, but we lost our 2-year-old son. So that was obviously a huge moment where I either could have just given up or I could focus on what I could control, right? It's I couldn't bring our son back. So I only could focus on, okay, what are the next steps then, right? And how do we still have his memory live on and so forth, right? So next question is, what is one principle you will never compromise on?
I would have to say probably integrity. I'm the one that's going to be the defender of it, right? And I want to be known for being someone that can be depended on, that's honest, that's reliable, that sort of thing. So, and I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your son. That to me is the worst possible, I mean, I share with you, my husband and I, when we were first married, I had visions of having 5 or 6 children. We experienced something I wasn't expecting, because I was adopted actually at birth to a 16-year-old and 18-year-old got pregnant with me and weren't equipped to be parents. And so I was adopted, and I never thought infertility would be part of my, having, been a surprise for some young kids. But my husband and I experienced infertility for a few years. And then I finally got pregnant after 3 years of just rigorous infertility junk. And 5 months pregnant, I found out that my son had passed.
Wow.
And I had to, have him, and we had to experience that loss. And so to me, that broke my that shattered me in a way that I hadn't been shattered before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, losing your 2-year-old son shatters you in a way that you're not equipped.
Yeah.
Right? You're just not prepared for that kind of, and you had to pick yourself back up, and you had to choose to keep going.
Yeah.
And you had other people that you needed to keep going for, right?
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks
for sharing yours.
Yes. I think, like you said, child loss is just another beast. I don't know how else to put it, but it just sucks. right? Like, it's just, there's no...
Your world stopped.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was a time where I literally had to decide to continue,
It was a choice.
Yeah. So...
And you remember making that choice.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Sorry.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
How long ago did you lose him?
It was 2018. So, yeah, I don't know. One day I hope I won't have to cry.
Yeah. But you know what? Own it.
Yeah.
And feel it.
Yeah. Yep. So, as far as the infertility, did you guys do IVF or in vitro? Is that what
we were literally right there. I had done a couple inseminations that were unsuccessful. I was on, Clomid and other hormones and that sort of thing. It's funny because I had actually scheduled an appointment to get LASIK. And they said you can be pregnant, but, we wouldn't advise you to be pregnant. Yep. So for like 1 month, I decided I'm not going to try to get pregnant this month. I'm just going to have LASIK. And that's the month I ended up finding out I was pregnant.
No way.
So we were just about to start financing the in vitro. So, yeah, we didn't have to go that far. But it was 3 years of, I swear I feel different this time. This time it's happened. And, right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think a lot of women have experienced that.
And that's another hell.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish on anyone.
No.
I mean, it's just, especially when you live in the state of Utah.
Yep.
And around every corner, seemingly a pregnant woman, right?
Or someone asking you, when are you going to have kids?
Right. And I actually got accused of putting my carear in front of starting a family.
Way.
So that was an extra little complexity.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm like, sure. Okay, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
We now have 3.
You have 3?
Yeah. My oldest just graduated from high school, and my oldest is a daughter. Second is a daughter. She's 16, almost 17. And then my youngest is Trey, who's on Harry's soccer team.
Awesome.
14.
Yeah, and I relate to you in the fact that when me and Lindsay got married, we're going to have like 8 kids, like we were ready to have a
harem.
A
whole slew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But after we lost Royce, it was like emotionally we just couldn't. Yeah. We couldn't give 8 kids the love that we wanted just due to our emotional bucket being shrunken down to almost nothing. Right. And you met Fletcher. He's like our entire world. But,
oh my gosh.
But I love that you said that. Like, integrity is definitely something that I think when people look up to others, that's probably one of the largest traits that stands out. Because it means you're trustworthy. It means you're dependable. Right. And I think if you have those 2 things, anyone can relate to you, right? And would want to relate to you. So we talked a little bit about your trials.
Yeah.
And the question is what is your greatest trial of your life? And we've kind of already talked about them, but if you want to just dive into like, how did you get out of those trials, or what really carried you out of them, I think is maybe the route that we can go.
Yeah, well, I think, and I've mentioned probably my top 3, right? And we share one, which, again, I mean, every experience is unique. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to meet, and I named him Taylor, my son Taylor, my maiden name. I didn't get to meet him personally. I got to hold him, but he didn't draw breath outside. But everyone would think honestly like, oh, it's got to be your leg, because that's like your longest standing. It's a continual trial for you. And for me, I was like, I would take that any day over the excruciating pain of losing a child, right? And then the infertility too, because you never knew if it was ever gonna work out, right?
Yeah.
But I would probably say the hardest one for me was losing a child. And then, I mean, like I said, I felt shattered. I remember I had to go to Target just days after, everyone had gone back to work. It was kind of fading out that we'd had this loss. And I was standing in Target and I couldn't believe, and I was getting something so simple like toilet paper or something. And I was standing there just shocked that cars were still driving by outside and that people were laughing in the aisle next to me, and their world hadn't stopped, right? Like their world hadn't stopped. Mine had. Mm-hmm. And like, it was all gray, right? The color had vanished for me, and the hope, I guess, for a time had kind of vanished for me. And so I think, like you said, I had to make a choice, right? I had to decide. And it's interesting because my whole life I've been asked to stand up in front of people and speak about this physical disability that I have. And I happily do that, right? It's like, sure. And I talk about, your work ethic and your attitude, and those are the things you have in control. But I'm like, I'm such a hypocrite, because here I am, like, feeling defeated and feeling like life's not fair, but it's the same principles apply. Same principles apply. So you have to choose what you're going to do with what you're dealt with, right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be amazing if, it was like, okay, you've met your quota for trials in your life, right? Because
Yes.
I think we've got that covered. We're like, okay, good, we're good for the rest of the time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But they just keep coming, and it just feels like, I love the word becoming or become, because I feel like I've become better every time I've had to go through something. I've chosen to not let it break me, but instead strengthen me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've actually found myself kind of proud of myself when something happens unexpectedly and I don't wig out, and I just kind of let it sit.
Yeah.
And then I work my way through it without emotionally letting it take me. Right.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way we learn what we're made of.
Yeah.
When we're put through this stuff, and you have to be pretty proud of yourself because you've learned what you're made of.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's definitely molded every aspect of who I am.
Yeah.
Right. My personality, my emotions.
And it's like your point of reference for everything now.
Yes, exactly. Because the Jaden before that experience and the Jaden after is a completely different human.
Right.
Right. And for the better, which is, I think, the blessing, right? Of like, I could have gone the other way, right? Some people do go through trials and they don't come out.
No, they don't.
On the other side for the better.
Right.
Right. And the things you were saying, like, resonate with me and hit a chord that I could never even explain into words. But yeah, when trials are happening, the world continues, and that's the hardest part. Yep. Right? Like, I remember the first bill we got after our son.
Adding salt to the injury.
And I was like mad. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
You're gonna make me pay for this
Yes.
now.
Yeah. And I'm like, when does it end? Right. And I have, it's funny you say, because I have the same exact experience at Target of literally being there and being like, all these people are just walking around me and they have no idea.
Yep. Right.
So.
And my world just blew up.
Yeah, exactly. And they're just going about their day, probably going to go pick up their kid after they do their groceries. So, yeah. And I think you've gone through, some would say, I'm sure, like, how have you gone through so much? Right. And people, have said that to us, like, oh, if I lost my child, I'd never be able to continue. Right. And
you've heard those same things.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a very appropriate response. Right. I know that any response is going to be the wrong response, right? When someone finds out something like that.
Yeah, people don't know how to.
No.
They want to encourage and, you know what I mean, and be supportive. But I've also learned what I say when I'm trying to console someone. I don't try to ever assign a reason, because they don't need to hear why I think it happened, right?
Yeah.
I just need to let them know I am here for you and I love you. And I am sorry.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I fully admit that what you're going through sucks.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not fair.
Yeah, I remember the first time someone said that, like, this just sucks.
It does.
And I was like, that's the best response I've ever heard someone say something to me. So, and I think this is good. Like, if I was listening to this podcast right now, and like, I would want to know how to respond to these things in advance. Right? And now I feel like when I do hear these things, I definitely have a better response.
And empathy.
Empathy, right? I approach it with, I'm just sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, unfortunately, you're part of a club now, and you didn't want to be part of this club ever.
Yep.
Right? And so now you have a depth to you that you can then turn around and share that insight with others that are going to go through it. And maybe you have or haven't had a chance yet, but maybe soon you'll have a chance to share your insights with somebody else, and you're going to help them through their worst day.
Yeah.
Because, it's their worst day.
Yeah. So, okay, the next question is, what is a quote that has benefited you?
Well, I had to write this one down, and I basically have already said it, but it says, getting knocked down in life is a given. Getting up and moving forward is a choice. And then I'd add one more. It says, trials teach us what we are. They dig up the soil and they let us see what we're made of.
I love that. Yeah, I love that analogy because it brings out every part of you, the good and the bad. right? And it's hard to face yourself. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, for me, it was hard to look in the mirror and like really try to come to understand, who am I going to be now?
Right.
After a trial, right? Or after an experience like that. And that was really difficult for me to do.
Well, and I think for some reason, we're given this perception that we are in control, right? Yeah. We're in control. Like, we should be able to keep our children safe. We should be able to, if we're healthy and we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, everything should go perfectly, right? And once we've grasped that we're not in control and that we literally are just hanging on and trying to, make work with what we've got. Like with me having an artificial leg, being an amputee, people, when they respond to me and say, I couldn't ever do it, I'm like, you got to work with what you've got, right? Yeah. Like, this is my life. There's not going to be a redo. I can't trade this body in for another one, right? So I've got to work with what I've got. And that's just the attitude I've had from the get. Like, when I was in the hospital, if I were to take a legal pad and cut it down the middle and write down a list of things that a girl with a fake leg can do on one column and then can't do on the other, I would imagine the can't do side would be much longer. But I've never had that perspective, right? I've never decided. In fact, after I learned how to walk again, I was like, let's see what this can do, right? And for the first time, I got to wear the same size shoes, and I didn't have to have a lift on my shoe, and it was awesome. Yeah. And as a 7th grader, I found out there was open tryouts for the basketball team at my junior high, and I came home and told my parents, I'm going to try out for the junior high basketball team, and they said, great, give it your best shot, right? Like, do your best. Let us know how it goes. So the first day, there's 3 days of cuts, and I made it for, through the first day. My name was on the door, and I was so excited. Next day, I tried a little harder. My name was on the door again, and ultimately, the 3rd day, my name was on that list on the basketball team. And I remember that the coaches put the 9th graders, the 8th graders, and the 7th graders in different positions, and they came over and started to get to know us 7th graders a little bit better. And I used to care that my leg looked real. I used to have like the paint fans that you look at to pick your shade. They have that for skin color. They have like a fan, and they'll come out and they'll try to match your skin tone just perfectly. And so I had a foam around my leg, and the skin color was just matched just right. And so I was wearing my high tops and a knee brace. And so as the coaches came and got to know us new 7th grade players, they said, hey, Erin, what's going on with your knee? I said, my knee's great. And they said, well, then why are you wearing a knee brace? And I said, well, for 2 reasons. 1, to keep my leg on, and 2, to keep it straight, right? Yeah. And they didn't laugh, and I thought I was so witty. And they said, no, really, are you nursing an injury? And I said, no, I have a fake leg. And they didn't believe me.
No way.
So I literally
they had no idea.
No, I rolled down the knee brace, and I popped off my leg, and I showed it to them, and I almost made the assistant coach pass out. She was not prepared. And so I also learned there's a shock value with being an amputee. So I've learned not to do that. But I guess my takeaway from that was, they didn't know. I made that team based on my effort and how hard I was trying and the time I put into it. But also, you could see where they would have thought, bless her heart, we're just going to put her on the team kind of as a mascot, just whatever. They had no idea. So, and
that had to feel so good.
It was so good.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to tell you I was the starter and I was the highest point scorer.
Just tell us
and all
that. We don't know.
In fact, I liked being on the bench during games. I'm like, no, go ahead. But I made the junior high basketball team.
That is awesome.
Coaches didn't know, right? So,
because then there's no question.
Right. And so again, it's that list. What can a girl do? Yeah. What can a girl not do? And if I would have limited myself. So that's the thing. I think we are our biggest obstacle. We decide what we can and can't do. Sometimes we self-eliminate before we even try something. And I've just thrown that theory out the window. Yeah. If I want to try something, I try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, doesn't. So ballet, not my thing.
So profound. Honestly, this is awesome. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm sorry we're not staying on topic.
No, this is great. No, honestly, this is exactly what I wanted. Is, because I've listened to podcasts, and there's just certain ones that just stick with me, right? And the person says something that I don't forget, right? And it changed who I was in that moment listening to it, and I can already tell this is one of those. Oh. So, Next question is, what is one small action that people can take daily to increase their happiness?
So I think it all boils down for me to gratitude, right? I mean, I have to reflect on the things that are going right for me, right? I mean, I was going to write a book. It's still not written. I have a title. It's called One's Better Than None. And then if I were to meet a double amputee, I'd have to ask if my theory was correct, but one's better than none. But it's just got to be that, like, you have to decide, I'm going to be grateful for what is going right. I'm not going to focus on the things that are unfair, right?
Yeah.
So it's got to be gratitude. It's got to be appreciating the things that I have been blessed with and the things I have been able to accomplish. I remember when my husband and I were engaged, we decided to hike Timpanogos. Wow. And I'm in the tower at the top. We're signing the guest book. And I turn around and I nearly ran into a man. And he just grabbed my hand and he starts shaking my hand. And I said, I'm sorry, do I know you? And he goes, thank you. I said, okay, for what? What are you thanking me for?
Yeah.
And he had his kids behind him and he said, thank you for showing us that we can do hard things. And in that moment, I realized people are watching me without me knowing. People are affected by what I'm choosing to do without me knowing. And so somehow I had profoundly affected that family that day. And for me, I was just living my best life.
Yeah.
I was just doing something I wanted to do, right? And so there's a little responsibility with that sometimes too, because I'm aware that people are watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is episode 4 of this series. And I believe gratitude's been almost every time.
Mentioned every time.
Yeah, as far as such a small thing, right? And on one of the episodes, we talked about how, like, when you have gratitude, you can't also have fear, right? And when you're able to eliminate fear, the sky's the limit, right? And I've found, like, when I'm in a state of fear, I'm slow to make decisions, right? I'm anxious. It doesn't serve me in any way, right? But the minute I sit there and do my gratitude journal, like, immediately it's a different person, right?
Yeah.
I'm all of a sudden this Jaden that's loving. I can confidently make decisions, right? And I think when you have gratitude, it's not just a feeling of thankfulness. I think it's also a feeling of, like, empowerment, right? When you have that. So
yeah, I love to hear that you have a gratitude journal, because that's one of my biggest things. I'm not a journal writer on a daily basis. I just can't.
Me neither.
But if I get a note from somebody, if I'm a photographer, so if I have a picture that I just love or whatever, I throw it into my book and I'll include the context of that. But when I'm having a day, right? When I'm having a day where I'm like, not today, right? Like, my leg hurts. I don't want to deal with this. I'd rather just throw it against the wall and whatever. Yeah. I pull open my I call it my gratitude journal, just like you did. And it realigns my perspective again. It reminds me of all the things that I have and how can I, and the thing with grief too, I was going to say this too. It's like, I think people have expectations of what grief looks like or what dealing with hard things looks like. And I think the best advice I ever had was grieve this, own it, go through it, let it go through you. I think that the best advice after that was, but you can't stay there. Right. And again, it's about choices. Yeah. But it's like that permission to, like, feel it and to own it and to let the process work its way through you, because it's changing you. Yeah. Right. And then you're at that precipice of, what choice am I making here at this point? But that permission to, like, let it ride, but just don't stay there. I think that's the best advice I'd ever been given with, okay, this does suck. Yeah. And this is life changing, and I'm going to let it work its way through me, but I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to choose to get up and keep going. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know who gave you that advice, but I've gone to therapy, and that was the exact advice.
Well, my mom is a licensed clinical social worker. Yep. So it was from my mom, but I could also say it was from a person that counsels. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. I love this next question because I think too often we look at what we can change instead of what we're proud of, right? With ourselves.
Right.
So what is a personal trait that you are most proud of?
I think, well, if you were to talk to my parents, they said I came unstoppable, right? But I think a better word would be determination. I'm proud that I'm a determined person. I'm determined to, I guess the one way I've come up with is on the mornings when you don't feel like putting on your leg, I still put it on, right? The mornings you don't feel like getting out of bed, you still get out of bed, right? And so I think determination is probably one that's probably carried me through, like, right? I mean, you have to have some kind of motivation or determination. So it's no small thing what you've overcome. Yeah. And I would dare say you're still overcoming because it's your whole life.
Yep.
There's markers. There's things that are going to remind you, and like you'll realize he's supposed to be this age at this point, and this is when he would be doing this. So this is a trial. This is a hurt that is not ending.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm worried that you're my inner voice.
Well, then I should be interviewing you. What's the next question?
Seriously.
What's the next question? You're like, stop giving all my answers.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm like, how is she? Who debriefed her before this podcast?
I'm like, do you know anything about me? No. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you did your homework or something because, you said it perfectly. I don't have anything else to add, honestly. Like, I think it's just, you have to have that gusto, like, and it ebb and flows for me, right? Like,
and that's natural.
Yeah.
If you think that life every day is supposed to be rainbows and butterflies and everything's supposed to be perfect and you're supposed to be happy every moment of every day, then you've got a misconception of what life is, right?
Yeah, and I think an exercise that has really helped me was, I was encouraged, I can't remember if it was from my brother or someone else, but they encouraged me to write down what the best version of Jaden would look like. And doing that, I found has given me that gusto. Yeah. Because it's given me something to shoot for.
An aspiration.
Yeah, an aspiration, right?
But did you not find that you're already kind of that Jaden?
So that's the next part, right? Is because a big part of my life has been like, I want to only read books that are self-help or going to teach me something, And then I got exhausted from it, honestly, of just constantly trying to change who I was, right?
And sometimes too much is too much.
Yes. And it wasn't until I started going to therapy that the therapist is like, dude, nothing's wrong with you. What are you trying to fix? Yeah, like, why are you like in the shop every day trying to fix who Jaden is, right? And that was a really big realization for me of like, I need to be okay. Maybe I am the best version in this moment, right? And obviously I'll improve and change, but in this moment right now, with the knowledge I have, with the abilities, maybe this is the best that I can give, right? So
well, and from where I'm sitting, pretty awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Serious.
Yes. So, okay, what is your approach to finding rest? And this one, because I was going to put what's your work ethic, but then I thought it'd be more interesting, honestly, to find out what someone's rest ethic is. Yeah. Because we all know how to work, right? We all know this is what you got to do. This is my day to day. But how do you find rest personally?
As a parent of 3 teenagers, that's an ongoing...
It's a challenge.
Yes, especially when there's late nights. But I mean, if you were to ask, we have close friends from college that we still travel with and hang out with, and we'll go camping and all sorts of things, and we'll go out of the country together. And they just know that by 10 o'clock, I unapologetically say good night. Okay. And they all stay up until 2, whatever in the morning. And I'm unapologetic about it because I know my body. I know how I function, and I know I don't function if I don't get enough sleep. So it's kind of ironic that was a question you had for me, because they all joke, like they'll compliment me if I make it to like 10:30.
Really?
They'll be like, "Oh my gosh, Erin, you're still awake." So
it's become part of your brand.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been studies, and I don't know how much I agree with it, but it does say that when you're an amputee and walking, it requires more energy than the average, right? And I don't know if that's why I've always just known I need to rest, but I cherish rest, and I need that recharge. So I love that you asked that, because my friends are always like, "Yep, if we can keep Erin up till 10:30, that's an accomplishment."
That's awesome.
I value sleep.
I do too.
I do. I do.
Yeah, and I think I call them non-negotiables, right?
Yes.
It's like there's certain things in my life that I have to put a non-negotiable on, right? And doing that honestly creates more freedom than it does restrictions, right?
Yeah. And I think that all helps with your mental health too, right?
Totally.
Like we have to be in sync with all of it.
Yeah.
And I think if you're rested, you can, I mean, if you're exhausted, you're not going to handle some stresses the same way,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's all tied in.
Love that. Okay. What is a moment in your life where you've experienced pure joy?
Man, that for me, I was like, well, which one?
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, everyone says the same thing, but when I married my husband, I thought, I know what love is, right? But then when we finally welcomed our first daughter, Kate, I was like, wow. And in fact, I thought the hospital couldn't contain the amount of love I felt for her and just the pure joy I was experiencing. So it's a little cliche, but when people say the birth of my children, whatever, I have to say I agree. But most recently, I had one of those experiences where, I don't know if you've ever seen the videos where someone that's deaf has and you've seen that they have emotionally, they have to take it from their eyes pretty quickly, because that information is so overwhelming to them.
Yes.
I had an experience just weeks ago. So my prosthetist, Wendy, she's a saint. She's an angel on earth. She months ago said, I'm going to get you into a blade foot. And so a blade foot is, I'm sure you've seen Paralympians, they're the long. And because I just had my foot amputated, my stump's longer than most. And so I've been limited to what prosthetics I can use, right? But she's like, I can get you into one. I'm like, no, you can't. So I've never enjoyed running. Running to me seems stupid. And for all you runners out there, I apologize, because I know there's a thing called runner's high.
No, they know it's stupid.
It's stupid. So a few weeks ago, she said, "Okay, your blade's ready to come and try." And I went to my prosthetist in Murray, and she's like, "Okay," I put it on, and she goes, "Let's go outside and let's have you run." And honestly, I've never been speechless. I mean, you can tell I've never really been speechless. I was so overcome with emotion, because if you can imagine, for the first time in my life, I've experienced something I'd never had an experience with before. Running to me, the only way I can equate it is like having a really good running shoe and then having a block of cement on your other foot, right? There's no give back. There's no, push off. It's just, right?
Yeah.
And then I have to pull my leg up to run, right? So it's not just I plant it, I have to pull it. This was energy storing enough that it pushed back for me.
Whoa.
And I'd never experienced that before. And I was so overcome with emotion. So I would describe that as joy, because I experienced something for the first time as a 48-year-old woman. And I was like, wow. And I was taken aback. So that kind of is up there with my most joyous moments.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an experience.
And I haven't gotten my leg yet. We're this close. And
Okay.
then I joke with all my neighbors. I'm like, try to keep up with me when I get it.
You're like, just wait.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll like running after all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Thank you.
And those videos, my gosh, they get me every time. Yes.
Yes.
And I'm sure it was like the first time you felt that your leg was working for you, not you working for your leg to make it work.
That was a beautiful way to describe it, because I hadn't had that before. So yeah, that's a beautiful way to describe it.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
This next question is, what is the current chapter of your life titled and why? So I highly encourage you to write that book, right?
One's better than none.
Yes, I think the world needs that book.
Oh.
And it's something that me and my wife, we just released a book this year.
Oh, awesome.
And we just did it digitally because we wanted it to not be something where we had to go find a publicist and we had to go through all these hoops. We're like, we just want to just put our true raw feelings into a book and offer it to those that it may benefit.
I love that.
And maybe that's something that you could consider, is just like, just get it out there.
Yeah.
And then if you do want to pursue it as far as like getting it published and things like that, then it's there, right?
You'll have to give me some insight after this and tell me what my first step should be. That's a little punny, right?
Yes.
But my title right now would probably be Becoming. I mentioned it before, but I think we all struggle with, where we fit in and who accepts us and who loves us, and are we seen, that sort of thing. And as I'm getting older and as my hair decided to go gray prematurely, and my husband's the one that convinced me to do this. I didn't want to. I kept my brown forever. And he's like, just embrace it. Embrace who you are. Embrace what it is. And so I feel like now I'm finally getting to the point where I'm like, I am there. I'm happy with who I am. I am becoming who I want to be. I'm getting there, right? Like, so I feel like, and it's still a progress. We're always a work in progress, but I think right now my chapter would be Becoming.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think becoming who you truly are.
Yeah.
Right. Shedding all the stuff that you've put up.
And the stuff that doesn't matter.
I know.
The stuff that used to be so important, you just realize it really doesn't even matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question, and it will kind of piggyback off this one, but what is your personal philosophy on the meaning of life? I know you mentioned you went on a mission, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was obviously, I'm sure, a pivotal moment in your life, right? And a book that's been profound for you is not only the New Testament, but also the Book of Mormon, right? But as far as you personally, what would you say is the philosophy, right? What's the meaning of life?
I feel like my ability to embrace what this is, what I've been put through, what I've had to endure, what I've been challenged with, is I know that it's all for me to become better, right? It's for my personal development, but I also realize it's temporary. And just our neighbor down the street died in his sleep, 21-year-old kid, just beautiful person, died last week. And we just attended the funeral yesterday, and you're sitting there wondering like how tragic this is, but to realize that there's life after this and that it's not a final goodbye. And if I didn't know that the atonement makes it me whole eventually, and I've always been fixated on the physical part because a part of my body is missing, right? It's never been normal or perfect. But then to know that the promise is that this is going to be fixed. But like, then it's like the more important aspect of that is even over the physical is the spiritual, right? Like we were broken in a way that we thought was unfixable in a way, right? Like you saw gray, I saw gray. And then eventually the color starts to come back in, right? Yeah. And it's because you do realize that there's a point to it all and that life isn't just a big suck and then you die, right? Like, and I feel like if I do get into a point where I'm starting to feel worried about myself, if I start to feel sorry for myself, I realize life's not been fair to me. How come so-and-so has this and this is me, right? Yeah. I then have, and you've heard it your whole life growing up, but I look outward and I try to show love and appreciation and serve others. I try to not think about myself, and then I get so motivated and I am so filled when I make other people happy or serve them. So that's just it's the atonement. Like I can't imagine waking up every morning, putting my leg on, the expense of having a prosthesis, right? Like it's just a mess. If you wanted a whole other podcast about being an amputee and what that entails, that's a whole other story, but it's all temporary and it's all worth it because it's building me. I'm becoming because of it. Yeah.
And I love the quote, life happens for us, not to us. Right. That's beautiful. And I think if we can see life, that's the meaning of life, then everything else just falls into place. Right. Right. And it allows you to move forward and it allows you to understand why things are happening to you. Right. Right. So, kind of going off that again, what is your strategy when faced with a difficult decision?
So, I don't know about, so I used to get really worked up about stuff and I'd have a few choice words and I'd, have to like kind of throw things against the wall, maybe throw my leg at something. But I am finding that even when I get bad news about something and it's not something I can control, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, what's in my control? What do I have power over? And then I just start working on that. This is what I've got to get done. And I can't change this. It does suck, but what can I do to make this work? And so I feel like and like when I'm faced with a decision between two things, I kind of have decided that I'm going to pick one and then pray about it. And if I don't feel any kind of inspiration either way, I just pick it and I work my tail off until maybe life points me in a different direction. But you just weigh out your options, you study it out, and then you pick one and you don't look back. Yeah.
Love that. What is the role of love in your life?
It's the only thing that matters to me, truly. People always ask, like, what is your job? What do you do? I'm like, I have my dream job. I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to be a mother. And as you know, it's not always exactly how you envisioned or how you planned, but I don't know. I was joking that I know I'm supposed to like help my kids become adults, and I'm in the process of doing that. But then I also am like, I don't know if I'm ready to let them go. It's too hard to get them here, right? So I do love my children. Like, we're a family that we're close, and we do love spending time together. And so love is my motivation with everything. A few years ago, my older brother died unexpectedly, right? Wow. He was 2 years older than me, and he passed away. And that was a situation where I was like, it was just over. There was and we'd had a tumultuous relationship. He and I had made completely different choices. We'd made different mistakes. Our lives choices took us different places. And so sometimes our lifestyle choices weren't simpatico with each other. And so it caused a little bit of distance. But as soon as we had just finished a family trip, it was a Christmas trip. And when I found out he was gone, I thought, oh my gosh, does he know I love him? Like, when was the last time I told him I love him? And it made me realize how fragile life is, and how a person's there 1 minute. And there's like, I would have given anything for 5 more minutes with him. Just give me 5 minutes to make sure we can, talk everything out. But love is my only focus. Like, I'm unapologetic about the time I spend with my family. I'm unapologetic about being with my parents and enjoying all that time I can when I have with them to myself, because nothing's guaranteed, right? Yeah. So I think love has been love loss, and you know what I mean? And then nurturing the love that I have and the relationships that I have. So
I love that. And I think that is something really important, as far as I used to always just think they know I love them. Right. And it wasn't until we lost Royce that I was like, whoa, I need to tell them I love them, and why. Right. And I think once I started doing that, then there's no question, and you can sleep better at night, right? Because life is so fragile, and I would hate to have that moment where it's like, man, I wish I would have told him I loved him more.
And does he know?
Yeah. Do they actually know that, right? Yeah. So, beautiful. Okay. Ready for the last question? You've done it.
Yeah. I'm living the dream.
Yes.
I'm nurturing it daily. Like, your question is like, what
is the dream you're nurturing currently?
Honestly, I feel so lucky. I feel, I've had people walk up and say, I feel sorry for you. And I'm like, I don't know why.
Whoa, yeah.
I don't know why, and it's their perception of what it is for me. And I appreciate the appreciation that they're acknowledging. They're acknowledging that this is difficult. Yes. We know, but I have never felt sorry for myself. And I'm not saying there aren't days when I don't feel sorry for myself. Like, there are days when I'm like, really? Like, really?
Yes.
Haven't I had enough? Right. But I have never felt like I haven't been blessed beyond measure. And to sit here would be dishonest if I told you that I am not living my dream, because I am. I have 3 beautiful children. I have a husband that loves me. I have 3 meals a day. I have a house. I have all the things I could ever need. I have a blade leg coming, right? Like, I mean, it's just phenomenal, and I'm awestruck by what I've been blessed with.
That's amazing. We did it.
We did it.
And I could honestly sit here for hours.
I know. I'm like, how long is this?
Like, is this going to be 3 hours long?
I'm like, how much information do you want?
No, I could sit here forever because our spirits are very similar in a lot of ways that are meaningful to me. So I thank you for coming on. This has been awesome.
It's been my pleasure. And
yes.
I have to say, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Every person has faced challenges, loss, and it's amazing if you just sat down for 5 minutes. And I know that you're experiencing that now with your podcast, but everyone has a story. And if you just take the time to listen, you can learn something from everyone.
Yeah.
So
no, I've been changed today. So thank you. That's
thank
awesome.
you. I have too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate all the viewers. If you've made it this far, you've made it through a lot, but, no, thank you guys so much for watching. I love this format. I think it really does bring out the best in the guests, and that's the goal here. So thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next one.